Thank you so much for inviting me into presenting this webinar. So today we'll be indeed talking about employee benefits in France. Let's get started. So the purpose of this presentation is to give you a very thorough introduction to what employee benefits are in France and how to basically end up with a successful setup. This is dedicated to companies more than individuals, meaning that here we'll be talking about the obligations and the trends for companies that hire French or let's say foreign people, but have access to the social security in France, and also that will benefit from the contracts, the insurances collectively as employees of a company. So we are an independent broker based in Paris, and I'm in charge of the international department here. We have a 20-member staff, small company, but we're very specialized in international business, meaning companies that are foreign companies based abroad and have a French subsidiary or French activity that is employing French people and French staff. So the purpose really of our role is to assist these companies into setting up the benefits if they're just opening in France, or if they currently already have benefits in place, to audit and study the competitiveness, the compliance, and the accuracy of the benefits. And this is mainly the job here of the consultants, and this is the team that I'm leading. These consultants, they're dedicated to supporting the firm into finding the best insurer, the best deal, the best third-party administrator to administrate the plans, and to make sure that the clients are getting the best possible service and the best competitive plans. So, a bit of context before we start and dive into the insurance piece. Most of the time what happens is a company get registered in France, they open an entity or not, meaning that you can remain a foreign firm and still have an activity in France employing French citizens. However, you don't have to have an official entity for that, so you will remain in a status that is called foreign firm with an establishment or not in France. And once you've done that, or you're getting this registration or starting to actually register, the work contracts and payroll will be set up at the same time. So obviously the first hires will happen and payroll will be set up. And the next obligation after you hire somebody and you actually set up the payroll, you agree on the benefits package, and you have to set up the compulsory insurances. And some of them are actually compulsory by law. Some of them are compulsory under the collective bargaining agreements. That is something that is agreed when you actually open and set up the entity. And then we have a configuration of the employees package throughout mainly the pay slips. So most of these compulsory insurances in France will be paid via the pay slips of the employees with a specific tax exemption or a specific tax treatment that will be applied on the contributions and automatically granted by law, as long as these contracts are compliant and set up in the rules of the French law and the collective bargaining agreement. So this is less heavily taxed than salary, for example. And the idea for us, of course, is to support for the setup of these insurances and to also be in contact potentially with the payroll providers to make sure that they configure the pay slips properly moving forward. So what are considered as employee benefits in France? We have two main items that are almost always there. Medical, so that's the mutuelle, that's a group plan, and that's something that is compulsory for any company in France, starting with one employee. So as long as there is a firm and there is one employee, there needs to be a group medical plan to be set up by the company, covering ideally all members of staff. Then we have what we call prévoyance, that is basically a combination of life or death benefit and disability benefits. So life and death, of course, is an event of life or death of the employee. And so disability is in case of sick leave or short-term or long-term disability. It's mainly a maintain of salary that will be paid by the employer, actually by the employer, and the employer will get a reimbursement by the insurer to maintain the employee's salary. We also have something called profit sharing. Mainly, the job of the broker here is going to be taking care of the savings plan, that is the vehicle for the tax exemption of the profit sharing. So this is something that has been regulated in 25. I'm going to come back to it. Mobility. So obviously, when a company have expats, seconded employees, people in short-term assignments abroad, they must be covered by certain type of insurances. So also something that is basically considered as employee benefits. There is also supplemental pension. In France, we have 3 layers of pension. I'm going to come back to it as well in a specific slide. And so supplemental pension is considered as employee benefits because it's an insurer type driven type of plan that is on top of what is mandatory by law as a contribution. And we have other types of insurances that are a bit more secondary, but for example, the maintain of unemployment for some certain officers or certain type of directors that don't have access to unemployment, the national scheme, then there are some specific insurances that can be set up for them. So this is the whole spectrum of employee benefits in France. We have 3 main roles around the policies in France. What we see is that there is at times the insurer that will be doing the 3 roles at the same time. So you can have a product with AXA, where AXA is also advising the client, and AXA is also administering the plan, reimbursing the claims, and will provide the HR portal or the employee portal. This is at times what is the regular type of setup in certain places in France. However, the insurer, because they are everywhere and they are big and they're usually investing in a lot of different fields, they tend to delegate some of these roles to a broker. So broker will be obviously the advisor of the plan. So the broker's remuneration is going to be based on commissions and is delegated from the insurer's revenue. And third-party administrators. And so these is entities that will specifically be taking care of the reimbursements and the HR portals for the HR to enroll, terminate employees, to the plans, to look at the premiums, pay the premiums, have an access to the documentation of the contracts, etc. So sometimes these TPA, so these third-party administrators, they can be owned by the insurer. So as I said, AXA will do the administration by itself. Or we also have brokers that have their own TPA. And so will basically be the broker and the TPA under the same branding at the same time. So this is also possible. And so the role here of the broker is going to be advising on the setup, the design, the negotiating with the insurers, doing the, make sure the plans are competitive. So trying to match the law, what is compulsory, as I said, is group medical, and that's compulsory by law, starting 1 employee. In France, group medical is very comprehensive, meaning that it's going to be offering benefits that is covering any possible medical act almost in the world, let's say, or in France. So we have inpatient, we have outpatient and pharmacy, we have dental, we have vision, and we have some preventive acts, but these are the main pillars of any medical act in general. And so you will see that in certain countries, for example, dental or vision is not automatically included. It's a rider, it's another plan. In France, this group medical will include all these benefits at the same time. And these benefits, they come on top of Social Security. So the benefits must be actually provided on top of Social Security, meaning that the employee must have access to Social Security to be able to be benefiting from these plans. So if we have a person in a specific situation, like seconded employees from abroad or an expat that comes to France that don't have Social Security, they cannot be enrolled under these group plans that we see here. So that's very important. Then group life and disability, so prévoyance. This is something that is prevalent 95% of the time because it's compulsory for what we call cadre employees. Let's say it's roughly a white collar or executive type of employees. There's no literal translation, so I'm trying to give you an idea of what it means. And under most collective bargaining agreement, it's compulsory to have benefits, prévoyance benefits, so life and disability benefits. Basically, we would fall under no no obligation if we are a company and we just employ non-cadre and we don't have any CBA. For example, if I'm employing a few non-cadre, and then I have no CBA, I'm just under regular law obligation, and the law doesn't force the company to set up group life and disability. When this is set up, it's also very comprehensive because it's covering most of the time life, accidental death, short-term and long-term disability. And it also has some extra benefits like education annuity, spouse annuity, etc. That will be, options that can be chosen to have the plan more top market, let's say. In terms of the cost share, the employer is supposed to pay a part of these contributions of these premiums. So for medical, most of the time, the obligation is 50% paid by the employer for the employee cost. Depending on the cost structure, the employer will make a decision into paying just for the employee or for the family as well. In terms of market practice, it's also quite market practice to pay 50% also of the family cost, I have to say. Then in terms of the death and disability, the contributions, the premiums are based on salary. And so basically the minimum to be paid by most companies is 1.5% of the slice A salary. Slice A is up to 47,000 euros, roughly in France. And so the employer must pay 1.5% of the salary of this employee, at least, to contribute to this plan. And so this cost share is regulated by law and also by CBA, so the collective bargaining agreement. Basically, if the CBA say that it's not 50%, it's 60%, the employer is forced to actually pay for this, or they actually expose themselves, for the employees to complain and to potentially sue the company if that's not the case. The plan design of these compulsory plans will be basically depending on the size of the company. Most of the time, when you have above 50 employees in France, your plan could be tailor-made, meaning that you will design every line of every benefit, and we will look every year at the loss ratio and the results of the plan, meaning how much you paid compared to how much you get reimbursed. And then the insurer can decide to increase the cost or actually maintain or reduce the cost depending on the overall usage of the plan. This is when you are above a certain size and you have your own plan, autonomous, tailor-made plan. Usually, these companies tend to have a works council in France, and they must be involved in the discussions, consulted for certain modifications, and the company can choose any insurer, any TPA, any broker at this stage for these tailor-made plans. The increases in costs are a bit more important potentially on these plans because it will depend on each and every company's own usage. So if the employees use the plan a lot or go to very expensive doctors, the plan will, reimburse a lot. And so potentially the insurer will say that it's not expensive enough in terms of the contributions and then increase the cost. Whereas when you're below 50 employees, usually we have what we call standard plans, SME type plans. And these plans are mutualized with the hundreds of other companies that will subscribe to the same package. And usually the insurer and the TPA is already packaged together. So you get AXA and the TPA, or Generali and the TPA that is already pre-booked and pre-designed in terms of the level of benefits. You go from level 1 to level 5, level 6. Level 1 is definitely below market, and level 5 or 6 is going to be at top market. It has a wide range of products on the market, except for international clients. So this is a specific alert that I'm putting there, is that it's difficult sometimes for a company that is registered as a foreign firm to find an insurer, because some insurers, they don't want to insure companies that don't have an official entity in France. And so at MIA, for example, this is really our specialty, is to find solutions, even though you have a company that has no establishment, no entity in France, and are based in the US or in Asia, where basically you'll have to do wire transfers from outside the UE, the United Union, European Union, the EU. And so you have to have specific ways of doing things in terms of the payments of the premiums. And in this case, at MIA, we're able to support any firm from wherever they are to find the right negotiations with the right insurers to do that. The prices can also be slightly higher for standard plans because it's smaller population, so the price itself of the plan is a bit more expensive than the tailor-made one. However, the increases in cost every year at the renewal is going to be much less than what you could see on a tailor-made plan because you're mutualized, you're pooled with hundreds of other companies that will subscribe to the same plan, and the insurer, when they increase the cost, they will look at the pool of company. They will not look at just the company itself. So that's very important. So diving into medical is a bit complicated in France in the way you have to look at the table of benefits. It's pretty complicated because every plan in France is designed according to social security. And so every medical act in France will have an amount in euros that is defined by social security, and then the plan will reimburse one time, two times, three times, four times, five times, etc. this amount. I'm going to show you an example right after so you can understand better how that works. But basically, when you look at the table of benefits, you don't see if I'm going to a doctor, I have 300 euro reimbursed. You will see I have 300% of the social security reimbursement index, which is a bit complicated to understand if you don't have this index. And so after you actually set up such plan, most employees, if they don't know how to read the table of benefits, they can ask their TPA to tell them how much they will be reimbursed for a consultation, for a dental act, etc. So when you have 100% of this social security index, you have basically a plan that is quite below market, which is very basic. The at market is going to be around 300, and then the 400 to 500 will be top market. In France, there is no waiting period to enroll. There is no medical underwriting as well, even with one employee. And there is direct settlement between Social Security and the medical insurer or TPA. Basically, when the employee goes to the doctor, if it's covered by Social Security, like 95% of the acts in France are, they will just give their Social Security card. Social Security will receive the consultation bill from the doctor, will reimburse part of the consultation, and then connect directly to medical plan, to the TPA, that will reimburse the rest. And so the employee doesn't have to pay upfront or do anything. They just have to go to the consultation, give their social security card, and then wait to be either directly reimbursed if they paid in advance, or basically it's going to be the TPA and the insurer that will be reimbursed directly via direct settlement, and the employee doesn't have to pay anything upfront. In France, we do have networks, but however, it's just to get discounts. Basically, every act is covered under any group medical plan. So you don't have to go to this specific doctor to get a reimbursement, or you're not reimbursed. It's just a way to use basically and to have some discounts, but any act will be basically reimbursed with the benefits. In certain countries, for example, if you don't go in network, the reimbursement is much less, or sometimes it's not even reimbursed. It's not the case in France. Everybody will be reimbursed. It's just that in certain networks, you will get a discount. It's a tax efficient benefit compared to salary, much more efficient. So it's costing less money to the company than salary. So if you at some point want to have this advantage, this benefit compared to salary, it's usually much more efficient. The overall taxation is much less. And in France, the group medical is very regulated. So what we see is that most of the plans right now in France, they have a base plan, which is reimbursing 95% of the acts. And they have what we call a non-responsible top-up that will reimburse mainly extra fee doctors that are most of the expensive doctors in France. And this is something that dates back to 2016 because all the base plan must be responsible, not reimbursing extra fees a lot. So you do need a top up to be able to be reimbursing extra fee doctors. So this is the kind of structure that you will see on a plan like this. So basically, how does it work? Each employee must have a social security number. Once they're enrolled under the plan, they will actually go to the doctor and put the carte vitale, so the social security card at the doctor. Social Security will reimburse part of this consultation based on its own index, the index that I mentioned. And then the remaining amount is actually paid by the medical plan. So if I'm taking an example, a GP consultation for the Social Security, it's supposed to cost 30 euros. So the index of this, the Social Security reimbursement base, is going to be 30 euros. And if I'm going to a consultation, Social Security will reimburse 70% of that, minus €1, that is the solidarity euro. That's how we call it. That's a legal thing. So basically, any consultation in France, €1 is deducted from the reimbursement and given to the state. So the total reimbursement from Social Security is going to be €20, and basically the medical plan will pay the remaining €9. As you can see, this is the best situation because the medical plan doesn't reimburse much and the price is contained. It's 30 euros. You can go to a specialist, or basically where you will see that the specialist is going to be also charging a lot of extra fees. And the example here with the 30 euro index from Social Security is going to remain. The Social Security will say a specialist in France is a 30 euro cost, so I remain with my index. However, if the consultation costs 100 euros, the Social Security will just reimburse 20. So then the medical plan will reimburse the 80 euros, missing to get out to 100. And so to get 80 euros, you need to have at least roughly 2.5 times the 30 euro index. And so you will need at least an at market plan around 2 to 300% of the 30 euro reimbursed, 2.3 times the reimbursement index. It's a bit technical. I'm still giving you that information, but it's for you to understand that basically the plans are set up this way and given this way. And it's a bit difficult to read, so just giving you some keys into potentially reading that. Moving towards group life and disability, one key item in France is that the gross salary that is basically used for the benefits and the pricing and the cost is the base salary plus the bonus plus the benefits in kind. So anything that is basically considered in the payslip is to be taken into account in the cost, but also the benefit to the employee or to the beneficiaries. So we're seeing here that it's different from also some other countries where you would just take the very basic salary and not the bonuses and not the benefits in kind. So that's important to know. It's also tax efficient, actually even more tax efficient than the medical. And it's very market practice, and it's kind of not really represented well in communications. So if you are currently a company and you have this plan, don't hesitate to communicate towards it, because most employees don't even know that this exists. They don't even look at the cost and see how it is, but it's a very important benefit because it's covering them in case of death or sick leave or long-term disability. For this plan, usually there is no enrollment needed. Basically, when the company pays the contributions, it automatically enrolls the employee. Only a beneficiary designation can be available, and it's not mandatory to fill one. Basically, if you don't do anything, your beneficiaries will be your spouse. And then if you have no spouse, your children. If you have no children, your parents, etc., etc. But there is a legal framework that is given by law for the beneficiaries. And if you actually want to change that, you will fill out this beneficiary designation form, and you can put anyone you like, even your dog, if that's something that is something you're into. So what we see is that the life benefit is going to be covering all the time death benefits. So if the employee dies, some capital sum is given to the beneficiaries. There are some optional benefits. Most of them are actually covered all the time, like accidental death. It's very, very common. And some others are a bit more expensive, like education annuity or simultaneous death of the spouse or spouse annuity, etc. But there is a small range of options that can be added to the plan to make it top market. On disability, so it's mainly short-term and long-term. Short-term is sick leave. So basically from up to 3 years of sick leave, you have a maintenance salary and there is a waiting period. So the employer will reimburse the salary of the employee and then get reimbursed by the insurer to do so after 390 or 180 days. And long-term disability is usually something serious. It's something that will last for a long time, and we have multiple categories. So usually category 1 is where you can still keep working, and category 2 and 3 are very serious injuries, illnesses, etc., where you cannot work anymore, and so you will get a salary maintained as an employee until you retire or you die before retirement, or you recover, because sometimes that can happen. So this is how the benefits for prévoyance, life, and disability work. And you will see that this is also very comprehensive because it's going to cover sometimes risks that in other countries are covered into different plans. In the US, in the UK, we'll see that, for example, you can have a group life plan, collective group plan, that is not covering workers' compensation, so the salary in case of sick leave. And then you will have a workers' comp plan, on the other hand, in the UK, to cover further salary in case of sick leave, etc. But it's a different plan. It's monitored differently. In France, it's going to be very comprehensive and it's going to cover every time at least the death of the employee, the sick leave, and the long-term disability in any prévoyance contract is going to be covered. It's a bit easier to read the benefits of the life and disability because it's a percentage of salary. So the death lump sum, for example, if an employee dies tomorrow and earns 100K per year, the lump sum will be 100% to 5 or 600% of the salary. So 1 to 5 times the salary, meaning if I have a top market plan and I have 500% death lump sum benefit, if I'm getting 100K, then it means that my beneficiaries are going to get 500K, 5 times my annual salary. There can be extras to that. If I have children, I have a bit more. If I'm married, I have a bit more. It depends on the design of the plan. But basically, this is how to read the table of benefits. And even in education annuity, which is basically a percentage of salary given to a certain age until a certain age to the children that are still at school, it can be 20% of the last 12 months salary before the employee dies that is given to the children every year until they stop being at school. So most of the time, it's as I said, it's compulsory for cadre, and it's most of the time compulsory under some CBAs or most CBAs, and they will then add some minimum requirements to this plan. You will have to have a certain level of benefits. You can have to actually cover the non-cadre as well. You have a minimum cost share that are higher than the regular 1.5 gross salary that I mentioned at the beginning. Similarly to medical, there is no waiting period, meaning that the employees are covered day one as of hire. There is no medical underwriting in certain cases. Most of the time, there is medical underwriting under 5 employees. So when you open a firm in France and you have 2 employees, there is a good chance that under most contracts, there is medical underwriting. At MIA, we have negotiated specific things with the insurers so that we also cancel the medical underwriting for the very small firms, because as I said, we're specialized into implementing foreign firms in France that start very small. So we have specific negotiations to suppress, cancel this medical underwriting, also for the death and disability benefits. So I can have a firm opening in France with 1 employee being the general manager, being with a very big package, starting day 1 with the most premium death and disability plan without looking at the history of pathology or issues of that person. So that's something we're able to do. And there's, as I said, no need to enroll the employees. They're covered automatically as long as they have a payslip and they're paying the contributions via the payslips. So to finish on the less vibrant, benefits, but still pretty trendy right now in France, we have profit sharing and supplemental pension. So Profit sharing is compulsory for companies above 50 employees that have had 50 employees for 5 years. So they need to have profit sharing in place, and it's tax exempted. You can put it on a short or long-term saving plan. And actually, it's compulsory to have a plan like this. However, now it's been regulated in 2025 that companies with 11 employees or more, if they're making profit, if they were making profit for the last 3 years, they also need to set up profit sharing. And there are 4 different types of profit sharing schemes in France. So if you're a company or if you want more information about this, feel free to contact me. I'll be happy to discuss that with you. So that's one thing, profit sharing. It usually comes with savings plan. So basically you pay a bonus to the employee that is tax exempted for the company. And then they will get the income tax exemption, putting them this money, the bonus, on a savings plan. Then we have supplemental pension that is actually more and more prevalent on the market because of the big reforms that we've had in France in the past years or towards pension. So it's a percentage of salary contributed every month. It's usually a mix between employer and employee contribution. And it's basically tax exempted at the payment of the contribution is tax exempted up to 8% of salary. And it's a big talent retainer because basically what most companies are doing in France is compulsory medical and life and disability. So if you're looking to do something to have a better package for the employees, you will probably look at supplemental pension. So why pension? In France, we're seeing that basically the current active working people are paying for the people currently retired. So if you have less and less active people right now with unemployment and people starting work much later than before, but you have more and more retirees because you have people that are aging thanks to the technology or medicine, etc. You have a lot of retirees and much less people to pay for their retirement pensions. And so what we see is that to compensate for that, the employer can decide to set up on top of the mandatory pension, supplemental pension. And so this will get a postponed revenue to the employee that is tax deducted when you pay for the contribution. And as I said, it's part of the package that can be very comprehensive and a big talent retainer. So if I'm looking at how pension works, very, very thorough, very thoroughly, but very just an introduction. You will have a basic layer of social security pension. It's a minimum available for everyone, every citizen. If you're an employee and you're working, you're then getting Agirc and ARCO, which is complementary pension, which is basically not a plan, not an insurance, not something that is subscribed by the company. It's just a mandatory contribution to these two funds in France. So you get the social security layer, then the employee type layer. And on top of that can be subscribed supplementary pension, supplemental pension. That is what we call a defined contribution plan. So you will decide the percentage of salary that is put into this plan and will transform into an annuity at the age of retirement. And so in many countries, it's actually quite at market to have a DC plan, a supplemental pension plan, mentioning as well the UK. For example, in the UK, the layers of pension, the state pension are maybe lower than what you would see in France. So therefore, it's very common to have supplemental DC plan that comes on top of the regular pension. And actually the cost deduction, the percentage of salary that is deducted of taxes is higher than the 8% that I mentioned before. So something is compulsory, mandatory is the two first layers, and the third one is not mandatory by law. However, in certain CBAs, like insurance companies, for example, it can be forcing the company to actually put a contribution for supplemental pension plan. But most of the time, 99% of the time, it's not compulsory. It's more at market or prevalent or getting more and more prevalent. So this new legal obligation of profit sharing is compulsory by law as of this year. So if you have a company and you have between 11 and 49 employees, you have to look into this. And basically, to be eligible for the obligation, you have to have at least 1% of your turnover to be considered as after-tax net profit for the last 3 consecutive years. So in 22, 23, and 24, your company, you're making profit above 1% of your turnover, then you are eligible for this obligation. At this stage, there's no penalty, but there could be one later on. And so basically what we're seeing is that when you're not compliant with the law in France, at first the law is trying to, see what people or companies are going to do. And if the government is seeing that the companies haven't played the game, they tend to put penalties later. So we do recommend to still, if you're in this situation of having 1% of your turnover as profit in the 3 previous consecutive years, we do recommend you to still set up something. And then obviously, when you force companies to do something, it becomes a market practice. So now most of our clients of 11 to 49 employees and actually making profit in the last 3 years have set up profit sharing. So you have 4 different types of profit sharing. I'm not going to dive into this because it's really technical, but basically you will see these 4 types of schemes will be working slightly differently from one another. And basically they are all eligible to be placed on a savings plan to get tax exemptions if needed. The agenda of payments, depending on the solution that is chosen by the company, can be right now in 25 or in 2026 based on the financial performance of the company in 25. And again, this is a very, very rough introduction. So if you have questions towards that, let me know and we can dive into more details. Above 50 employees for more than 5 years, you have to set up participation, which is of the type of the profit sharing we've just seen. And so the legal formula is given by law, so you cannot really move around much around it. And so it will generate basically an envelope of bonus then that is divided into the employees. You can still make some choices into how you want to pay this bonus to each employee, depending on their status, their salary, their history in the company. But basically, this profit will, if you're making profit and you have more than 50 employees for 5 consecutive years, you'll have to pay out to the employees some of that profit. And this calculation here will allow you to do that. So we have 4 more minutes before questions. So very quickly, I did mention as an introduction, what we're able to do at MIA, where we differentiate on the market and we are able to potentially help you on that, is that we've been designing our support for very small headcounts. And so to also make sure that the companies that are opening an activity in France with no establishment, with an establishment, foreign firms, depending on whatever the status is, we always have a solution that will be compliant with the CBA obligations. You have access to premium packages, which obviously translate all the quotes in French and in English to make sure that anybody get the most understanding of what's I say in there. We tend to also give the best daily support to the client, and we give the best, try to find the best TPAs for the employees as well of these clients. So usually we tend to have an online portal where HR could do anything, a mobile app that works well. And the idea really is to make sure that we can cover any firm, whatever their size, wherever the geography or where they're located, that employee in France and with an access to no medical underwriting and a good premium package if they want to. We also do retrospective start dates, meaning that if you open the company in June and you hire the employee in July, but you forgot or you didn't have time to take care of the insurances, we can date back these insurances to the date of hire up to 3 months and sometimes even more. And because the main point is to be compliant with the law, because as I said, the medical and the death and disability, they must start as of day one of the first hire. So you need to pay contributions and taxes accordingly. So you can do retrospective start dates on most of our plans. And we also take contributions paid from abroad, meaning that you have, again, if you have no direct debit possibilities, you have a bank account in the US, Latin America, Asia, Africa, we're able to actually get these payments and still to get the firm and the employees covered in France. So how it usually works, and this is actually the last slide, to get the quotes, most of the time we would need the census data, your CBA, your strategy if you have any, and your existing design and pricing if you currently already have plans as a firm. Then we discuss the plans, we negotiate with the insurers, we give you the best proposals. We can discuss the proposals together as well. And then obviously at some point you will subscribe, hopefully, and get the documents. Everything is actually most of the time um, digitalized, so the electronic signature to actually set up the plans. And then we take care of the, actually sending you the contracts for the employer to sign all the information for the employees to get, an idea of what you subscribe, clear processes into how to, enroll employees, terminate them, deal with the sick leaves, all the actions you need to do. We also provide the legal formalism called DUE, which is the unilateral decision of the employer. It's a document that must be ratified when you open such plan, when you open your company in France. And also we communicate proactively the rates, the contribution rates to payroll providers if you have one, because usually when you open a firm in France, you don't have your own payroll team. You'll go to a payroll provider to do that. We proactively give them this information because it's key that the pay slips are configured very well so that the premiums are paid well, and then everybody's covered on time, and the plans are the policies are paid accordingly, and then you're compliant with the law. I'm going to stop there saying thank you so much for your attention.